Okay, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Women Worth and Wellness is now an international event. We've got speakers now from all over the world, which is wonderful. And before we go any further, I want to begin with gratitude. And that is, first of all, to thank Crystal, who always does an exceptional job. The technology, if it were up to me, we wouldn't be doing any of these events. So Crystal, thanks so much for doing such a great job. I also want to thank Paul Chapman, with whom I've been working for 4 years as a sponsor. And again, as we women know, it's always great to have men be champions for us. And Paul has been second to none. So Paul, do you want to come on and just introduce yourself?
Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, everyone. And good afternoon, all the special guests of this Women Worth and Wellness event, first in the January series. Welcome. As Nancy said, I'm Paul Chapman. I'm an investment wealth advisor with RBC Wealth Management in Canada, in and around Toronto. And I'm honored to be the lead sponsor on many of the Women Worth and Wellness events for the last almost 4 years, including the upcoming events we have this year. So in my business, I strive to be, along with RBC, leaders in focusing and championing the opportunity and privilege of advising women executives and leaders and business owners and their intergenerational families on all aspects of their wealth stewardship. So this is a key priority, and I'm happy to be part of this. So I'm looking forward to hearing from all the wisdom of these incredible women leaders, what they'll share with us today and every Monday of this month. So I'll send it back to you, Nancy. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Paul. COVID, as we all know, has just brought us all to our knees. And the Women Worth and Wellness initiative was started in 1994, so that's a long time ago. And very simply, it's about boomer women and their daughters' health and wealth, net worth and self-worth, philanthropy, and legacy planning. So it's the whole gamut of what we all work towards. But health is the cornerstone. And health is our physical health, but increasingly so, especially post-COVID, it is our mental health. And so as we thought about the year ahead last fall, I really felt that there's so many accomplished women who the world needs more of to step it up and have the right mindset to keep on doing and making a huge contribution to the best of your ability, even in your current role or mentoring a younger person. But with everything that has gone on, sometimes we pull back. And what I'm encouraging, this is where the daring and caring theme came from. The world needs more women leaders. Think about Ukraine, think about Iran, think about the environment, think about all the areas in the world that can really use our unique attention. And so that's what this series is about. So over the next 4 weeks, we have 8 incredible women sharing their stories. Each of these women is extremely accomplished, but they're not sitting back. They're continuing on to make a huge contribution. And my new word for 2023 and beyond is illuminate. My goal with this series is that you will feel illuminated, inspired, and informed to bring your uniqueness forward and make the best contribution that you can make. So I'll turn it over to Crystal, who will introduce Lisa Gable first, one of our 2 speakers today. And then after she wraps up, she'll introduce Karen Cairney. But by all means, as we go, put your comments, questions, thoughts in the chat, and we'll pick those up after Karen's presentation. So thank you. And again, welcome.
Perfect. Thank you, Nancy. So as Nancy said, this is the first webinar of the 4-part series in January. So we look forward to seeing all of them. So this is the Daring and Caring Women Leaders for Positive Impact, Change with Intention. We have first up Lisa Gable. Lisa has counseled Fortune 500 CEOs and served U.S. presidents and governors, as well as a U.S. ambassador and a UN delegate. Her mission is to support the next generation of leaders and organizations that are solving the world's biggest problems. And she is a 5-time award-winning Wall Street Journal and US Today bestselling author. Wow. And recognized as an innovative global businesswoman who leads with discipline and diplomacy. In addition to her multiple corporate roles, including CEO, Lisa has served U.S. presidents and governors, as well as U.S. ambassador and UN delegate. Please join us, Lisa. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Well, thank you. It is such a pleasure to kick off 2023 with all of you. You know, early on, I was often the odd girl out. I started my career at the Reagan Defense Department when I was 21 years old. The seats were man size. My feet literally didn't touch the floor. I weighed nothing, and I'm 5 feet tall, so you can only imagine how young I looked. And not surprisingly, my nickname became Tinkerbell. But you know what? I embraced it because my fairy dust was data and determination. But what I realized as I started my career in a room where no one looked anything like me, and I've realized it more the older I've gotten, is how much I owe to all of those people who moved boulders out of my way. There was a woman by the name of Helen Marie Taylor. She died 2 years ago at the age of 98. She had quite an impact on my life. She gave me a full scholarship to the Georgetown University Master's Program of National Security Studies. The program was 85% men. Most of them were in their 30s. And a lot of them were working on their first star if they were in the military or going up to a higher level within the intelligence category. And so here I was, 21 years old, sitting with them because the classes were taught at the Pentagon at nighttime, so I could work during the day. And when I think back, the opportunity that I had to get that very important credential, it only happened because of Helen Marie Taylor. And there have been people who've played that role in my life every single day. And so it's one reason I always get so excited to talk with women like you from around the world, because each of you, whether you are a board director, a volunteer, a CEO, each of you has a desire to move the organizations that you're involved with to a higher level of engagement. You want to have impact. You want to make a difference in the lives of other people. But you recognize that you can't do that without figuring out what went wrong in the past and how you're going to change it. And maybe it's because I'm older and I look back on a series of activities, but what I realize is that everything always comes down to people. And it always has. People cause the problems, and then people are required to come on board and fix the problems that were created. And so through that process, what it's done is it's demonstrated to me is that it's the intentional actions we take to have impact on the life of another person, to move a boulder out of their way, to help them at that critical stage of growth. That's really what it's all about. One of the quotes that I just love is one by Desmond Tutu. And what he said is that you can only eat an elephant one bite at a time. And so in my house, we have the same, what's your bite of the day? And so it might be that I always make sure that I do just one thing. I get it off my plate every single day. And so it may be sending out my video to someone about a speaking engagement. Maybe it's filling out an expense report, or maybe it's taking that box of gently worn clothes that I boxed up 6 months ago and it's been sitting on the floor of my closet. And I'm finally going to take it to the Salvation Army or Goodwill or to a place that will take my donation. And what I realize is I do that mental checking off of things on my list, I become less overwhelmed. And I become more capable of focusing on the big things, the important things. And what we recognize is that big ideas involve people. They involve what's happening this moment in those people's lives. And so whether we are talking about a big idea that we have, something that we want to do in climate change, or maybe in education, or maybe it has to do with helping out women in democracy, whatever your big idea is, the question is, how do you bring it down to the point in time where a person is that's that future problem solver? How do you help people move forward? And what we know is that mentorship is really that critical ingredient that helps stabilize things when they're very complex. And mentorship isn't just coming down from a mountaintop with our sage-like advice. Instead, it's being committed to someone else's welfare, being committed to their advancement, being a partner for them through every stage of their life, or at least through the critical points of their life. And I was so fortunate in that I had a mentor that really, she and her husband made a big difference in my life. And I'm going to tell you how I met them, because they probably had the most critical impact on the first 15 years of my career. I was working at the White House. And, as dream jobs go, it's pretty nifty to be working at the White House in your early 20s. But the reality is, it's an office building. You have to do grunt work. And part of that grunt work sometimes is scheduling, and sometimes it's taking care of entertaining someone. And there was a woman by the name of Barbara Barrett who I was asked to take over to the West Wing of the White House. That's where the president's office is. And I needed to keep entertaining her until my boss was ready to meet with her. She was going to be deputy administrator of one of the largest agencies in the United States, one of the government entities. And so my boss, it was 2 hours late. And here I am, I'm like 22 years old, wondering what I'm going to talk to this woman about who's this high-level position. But I didn't need to worry, because she was heavily engaged in asking me a lot of questions about myself. And we got into a conversation. And that moment of being stuck into a basement had the greatest impact truly on my career. Her name was Barbara Barrett. She would go on to be a board director for Raytheon. She would become an ambassador from the United States to Finland, and then she would be Secretary of the Air Force. And at the end of the Reagan administration, she introduced me to her husband. His name was Craig Barrett. He was Senior Vice President of Manufacturing at Intel Corporation, and he would become CEO and Chairman of the board. If I hadn't taken that opportunity of turning what was being stuck entertaining someone into an opportunity, I wouldn't have had all of the amazing things happen to me. And so what I know is that the best thing about mentorship is it combines all the greatest things about each of us. Ambition's good, collaboration, generosity, and direction. And that's more important now than it ever was before. Because I don't know about you, but my mentees, they're not all as energized as they used to be. They're not waking up with passion and purpose. We're spending more time about the struggles that they're having. And it's not surprising, when we came out of COVID, the world didn't reset the way that we thought it would. And economically, things are tough, and we've got war in Europe. And so through that process of understanding what we need to make people more excited, one of the things that I've thought about is where we're causing a problem. And one place that we are is that politicians keep talking about a problem as too big to solve, or it's too big to fail. And so people are kind of throwing up their hands, and they're wondering, well, why try? Why try? But what I know at this stage of my life, and for those of you who are on this call, we're at a place where we can remove those boulders from people's paths. We're at a place where we can help them develop relationships. I had the opportunity to speak at the Mayo Clinic. It's a medical clinic in the United States, very well known. And they had something called the Rise for Equity Conference. And this concept really came home for me. I was talking to people who were some of the most brilliant minds, brilliant doctors, brilliant medical practitioners. And we were taking questions from the audience. And something hit me. They were saying, well, what can I do? And they were phrasing things in this way that the problem was so big. And I realized in that room, we'd spent a lot of time talking about big aspirational solves, or having something that is, again, too big to fail. And that in those conversations, in those questions, I realized that sometimes people don't take credit for the changes that they affect. Sometimes we don't celebrate the small steps that enable somebody to have a direct impact on someone's life. And so we don't talk about peer mentoring. Maybe there's a peer that you've been mentoring and you've been helping up the career ladder. That's a great thing, because that person wasn't going to get there without your help. Or maybe you're in the medical profession and you're helping a mom work her way through some of the big questions about the medical issues for her child. You've entered into a person's life at that moment of crisis. You've changed the trajectory of their life. What you've realized is people aren't assets or problems to be solved, they're assets to be saved. You're developing relationships. And what we've seen is those relationships, like the new ones that I've developed through this program, that's what keeps the world moving forward. And I've seen that in action. Over the past year, I've been involved in the activities going on to support those in Ukraine. And one of the first groups that I met was something called the Armada Network. It was a network of faith-based organizations, churches and synagogues that was formed during the Crimean annexation in 2014. And they have a project that's called the 10 Men Project. And basically, they've tapped into these relationships between these churches, between these synagogues. And immediately when the war began, they were my best source for getting resources to people on the front lines and getting children and elderly out of harm's way. 10 men, small amounts of money. And then I had the opportunity to meet a woman by the name of Irina Rubis. And what Irina did is that she had to flee with her family initially. I believe she's back in Ukraine now. But she was a businesswoman focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So literally, as she's freeing her country, she made a decision to take a small step. She did a survey. She went onto LinkedIn and she found everyone that had Ukraine as their place of residence. And she did a survey. It ended up being with about 3,400 women. And then she sent it to people like me, and I got it out to people, and so did my friends. And that survey was of these women, some of whom left Ukraine because they had small children, or their husband was fighting, or their house was destroyed. And others were women that were at the start of their career, were older in their career, and so they didn't have small children. They stayed in the country. And she got all the details about what they needed from resources from the rest of us to survive and to thrive. And then she went and she set up mentorships with these women, with European women on boards. Maybe somebody right now that's listening is one of those women, and thank you if you are. And now I'm helping her get resources for women in the United States, basically mentoring, helping those women fill gaps, helping them figure out how they're going to survive during this time period. That's really what it's all about. It's filling those gaps. It's assets to be saved. It's helping people move forward. And one of the things that it came back to me is my dad. My dad died in 2019. And my father built an institution from 150 people to thousands of people. But you know what? When my father died, we got, as it's expected, hundreds of letters from different people. He was a very prominent individual. But the letters weren't about the institution that he built. They were about the people he helped. And my dad always taught me, he said, show up when you say you're going to show up, no matter how tired you are. Keep the commitments you said you would keep, no matter how inconvenient they turn out to be. And he mirrored that in his life in ways we never knew. One woman, she was a college student. My dad heard that she was going to drop out of college because she couldn't afford to stay in. So he called her into his office. He helped her fill the financial gap. And then he sat down with her and they put together a 6-year plan for college. In the United States, college is normally 4 years, but they put together a 6-year plan. And they found a way for her to keep working part-time, going to school part-time, staying on her mission, staying on her vision of being a businesswoman someday. And it turns out she's a very prominent businesswoman today. And then there was another woman who wrote to me, and she was somebody that I knew growing up. And she talked about how in the 1980s, she was a journalism major. She wanted her first television internship. And my dad heard that her male teachers wouldn't help her with that internship because women can't be on TV. Women can't be anchors. And so we have to secure that first internship. And today, she's a very prominent anchor in a major metropolitan area on American television. And she gives all the credit to my father. Because the reality is how we treat people, how we react to success or failure, who we lift up along the way. If we act with generosity, compassion, empathy, we know there's a return on the investment. There's a return for the giver and the receiver. And what we never know is how impactful that person's life may be because we stepped into it. So I have one more story to share with you all before I wrap up. As I mentioned, I was working on things with Ukraine, and I was working with one of my donors. He was a hedge fund manager. His hedge fund is funded, it's a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund. It's funded some of the biggest successes in drug development across the world. One of his areas of focus is making sure there's enough money for rare diseases. So when the war started, he pulled together a group of people that were investors with him, that were successful companies, and he wanted to make sure that people with rare diseases got the drugs they needed so they could live, because if there was a time gap in their drugs, that would be serious for them. And he and I were supposed to have a meeting, and I was running late for that meeting, and I said, I'm so sorry I'm late. I was working with a group of people about Afghan refugee resettlement, and the meeting ran over. And he said, oh, Lisa, because I've got a group of Afghan families living on my farm. And I'm like, you do? I had no idea. And he goes, well, in 1982, when I was a 4-year-old, my family fled from Russia. We were Jewish, to the United States. And somebody took us in. And I thought to myself, do you think anybody, that family that took in this 4-year-old, has any idea about the impact that he had on the world? He's a billionaire who's funded some of the biggest drug development successes in the world, keeping so many people alive, keeping them more engaged in life because they have a drug that can help them. He's got sent money to Ukraine, and then he's got these Afghan refugees living on this farm. And so really it all came down to, how do you want to be remembered? And so as I leave you today, I'll give you 3 things. Make the most of introductions and then reciprocate them. You want to do some matchmaking on behalf of other people. Stay relevant and identify places where you may be able to step in and fill that gap for someone else. And finally, invest in personal growth. Because what you want to do is you want to focus on creating a life of fulfillment. You want to have that empowerment of others be the guiding light that you follow. You're going to take stock of your actions. I really want the people that are listening right now, celebrate all the good things that you've done. You might never know why. But let positive engagement be your guide. So thank you so much for giving me the chance to kick off with you. I know Nancy's been kind enough to invite me to come back in February. I'm headed off to Davos on Wednesday, and I'm going to be meeting with a lot of people. And I just so look forward to sharing with you all and getting to know you and hearing from you via LinkedIn, where I can be most helpful in helping you bridge those gaps on behalf of someone else. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I think the message that is front and center is that it's not about what is happening to us, it's us helping others. And that in itself is tremendous leadership. And as you mentioned, you are going to Davos, and you did say you accepted the invite to come back. So we will be very, very keen to know about what you learned there, because obviously that will be something very special. Very briefly, tell us about your book, Turnaround. Tell us about Turnaround.
Turnaround. So my book, Turnaround, How to Change Course When Things Are Going South. Basically, what it does is it tells you about 3 turnarounds in business, government, and philanthropy that I've run. And what I do is I take the engineering practices that I learned in process control from Intel Corporation, and I interweave the art of diplomacy that I learned at the State Department and the Defense Department in the White House. Because what I really try to do is be very process-oriented, but have discipline and diplomacy intertwined in order to ensure that any changes we make benefit both our customers, but also the people that are working as part of the change agents.
Super. And just one other comment to all our special guests. Lisa is my new best friend on LinkedIn. That's how we connected. And I will encourage each one of you to connect with Lisa, because she's always posting illuminating and inspiring content. So Crystal, over to you, and perhaps you can introduce Karen.
Yes, it would be my pleasure. Thank you, Lisa. So our next amazing speaker, I'm so excited to hear from you, Karen. Karen Cairney is known for her passion, perseverance, and integrity. She's not afraid to ask what if and do what it takes to make ambitious ideas a reality and get to the heart and values of an institution. She believes that your people are your greatest asset and the key to achieving your goals. Her ability to bring out the best in people is a reoccurring theme throughout her 25-year in Canada, the US, Asia, and the UK. She is an accredited executive coach and has coached C-suite executives, academic leaders, and advanced teams from across the sector, using a healthy mix of challenge and curiosity to help them see their strengths in a new light and push themselves to reach their goals. It is my pleasure to bring Karen with you to share what she has to say today. Karen, are you there?
I am, Crystal. Thank you for the lovely introduction, and greetings and happy 2023 and New Year from Scotland. Lisa, it's wonderful to share this platform with you and hearing about the inspirational people that you've met and how they've influenced your journey. And I think you'll hear today some commonalities between what Lisa was saying and some of what I have to share. And I think, as has been mentioned, people are very much at the heart of it. And if there's one thing I've learned over my lifetime as a woman and a woman in business, although we don't have all the answers, we all have a contribution to make. And secondly, we shouldn't shy away from standing up, whether because of fear or a lack of confidence, as we're all unique and we all bring our own unique perspective to the table every day. And so when I first heard the topic for this leadership series from Nancy, daring and caring women leaders for positive impact, a lofty topic, and the focus on change with intention. And as I seek to navigate the changes and challenges in my life, my thoughts often turn to the people, and in particular the women in my life, as I look for strength and inspiration and much needed perspective in this world that has a lot of challenges and often chaos around us. And whether that was my paternal grandmother who raised 10 children single-handedly while working to feed and care for them, and despite her own hardship, always had an open door for anyone who needed help and support, even although sometimes she could barely support her own family. Or my mother, who after raising 3 children, I'm the oldest, went back to school and obtained her high school diploma, then her business management certificate, and latterly ran 2 charities in Glasgow in areas of significant deprivation. And at a young 81-year-old continues to inspire me with her drive and creativity and her sense of humour. And a major Canadian philanthropist was the one who started my education in philanthropy by gifting me the funds to make it happen. And we're still in touch. And I learned early that building those strong relationships with people was the key to my success, but also sustaining them. Often my friends will say to me that I'm really good at keeping in touch with people because relationships are two-way, it's not all one way. And the many female leaders and friends that I have surrounded myself with continue to dare and care and impact the people around them. But also my father, similar to Lisa's, who sadly passed away 6 years ago, was the more introverted and quietly thoughtful person in the family. But he taught me to always question in pursuit of the right answer. And in his own quiet and thoughtful way would support everything that I did. Even if he didn't always understand, he would question to listen as well. So they and so many others who've gone before us serve as an inspiration on how to endure through difficult times in life. And they've come out the other end stronger and more resilient. And I think while fortunes may change in our lifetime, they've taught me that humility and decency and dignity transcend money and material goods, and they never go out of fashion. I'm a naturally glass half full person, and so always tend to approach things looking for the possible. So many times in our lives, decisions are taken from us, and living in a post-COVID environment, if we even can call it that, the way we live in the landscape has changed dramatically. Some for the better, but other things we're still adjusting to and still trying to figure out. I think change is, however, a constant, and we can't wait for it to take us on a journey. We need to be the ones who map out our own path through the change, even if sometimes we don't know the final destination. And I'm sure we can all, in hindsight, think back about major changes in our lives, professional, personal, and how we navigated them and the lessons that we've learned. And I think I certainly take each one as a learning experience, because there is no one formula that works for everyone, because we're all, as I said at the beginning, individuals with our own unique talents and our own perspective. But there are tools and tips we can take with us in our journey through change. And I know it may sound often a cliche when we talk about journey, but I feel that that's what it is, with the final destination unknown. But along the way, we'll meet interesting people, visit fascinating places, experience personal challenges, and take each of these moments in our lives as opportunities. One of my favourite poems is by Robert Hastings. It's called The Station, a reminder to cherish the journey. And there's a quote from that poem that holds great resonance, I think, to today's topic. And it is, "Regret and fear are twin thieves who rob us of today." And how true is that? And my professional journey, as was touched on earlier, started in Canada 20 years ago. And I've been a professional fundraiser for over 30 years now. Can't believe where time goes. And my first job, and where I met Nancy, was with LEAF, the Women's Legal Education and Action Fund, a Canadian charity fighting for women through test case litigation at the Supreme Court. And that's where Nancy and I first connected. And when we reconnected last year, we realized that we still both have the same poster on our wall of Nellie McClung, who was one of the famous 5 who ensured Canadian women got the vote. And that famous quote of "never retreat, never explain, get the job done and let them howl," a phrase that I've used throughout my life and throughout my career. So when I reconnected with Nancy, I think it was serendipitous that it was in the background of our office at that time. And many of those women involved with LEAF, they were the original daredevils, trailblazing to change the pathway for women and girls across Canada and beyond. And after LEAF, I spent time at Women's College Hospital Foundation, and again worked with some major female philanthropists, again who worked tirelessly to promote the needs of women's health. And again, back then, over 20 years ago, some unfundable areas, or ones that perhaps didn't fit that traditional funding mould. When I came back to the UK in 2006 as Director of External Relations at Edinburgh Napier University, led by the first female Vice-Chancellor in Scotland, Dame Joan Stringer, and before setting up Cairney and Company 6 years ago, a global fundraising consulting firm. And I work with many leaders across multiple sectors. But as a coach, I speak with many of my clients, both men and women. And sadly, more women than men tend to talk about their fear of standing up. Or I think sometimes we call it imposter syndrome, as many of us label it. And it's a common feeling of many high-achieving people, of that feeling of fraud, of not being deserving of their success, and where that self-doubt begins to creep in, and feeling phony or unable to live up to others' expectations. And I've certainly experienced that over my years. And when I feel it creeping in, I now try to kind of examine the evidence for my doubt and whether there are facts to support how I'm feeling. And that allows me to think through how real or rational the doubt is. And there was a great quote similar to Lisa. I do love a good quote. He was a Nobel Prize winner for literature, and a British mathematician, Bertrand Russell, once said, "The fundamental cause of trouble in the world today is that the stupid are cocksure while the intelligent are full of doubt." I'm sure there's a few people come to mind in that statement in today's environment. And as we all know, there's a multitude of amazing journals and great periodicals and books that talk about leadership, whether it's transformational leadership, transactional leadership, taking a coaching style, authentic leadership. There's a lot of information for us to digest. And the reality is we probably dance between a number of different styles at any given time. But whatever your style, I believe it's about being your best self, your authentic self, not what you think others expect of you. But to know the style that works for you, you first need to get to know you. I often ask people who I'm coaching to kind of describe themselves and their approach to people and to leadership. And often I get some wonderful adjectives that describe how they do their job, but I don't always get the personal attributes of those people and what makes them different. And sometimes we have to dig deeper, and I don't think it's only a Scottish thing where people don't like to talk about themselves, but I think we have to stand up, and we have to be proud, and we have to be bolder, and we have to recognize and acknowledge what we bring to this world. I'm a huge fan of Brené Brown, and I'm sure many of you have seen her TED Talk on Dare to Lead. And I listen to them regularly. And she said on leadership, I define a leader as anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes, and who has the courage to develop that potential. So being your best self will help others to develop their best self. And in Dare to Lead, Brené talks about, in a time of crisis, it's all about empathy, vulnerability, and self-care. It's about having the courage to be vulnerable. And it's not about winning or losing. It's about the courage to show up when you can't predict or control the outcome. And I think that's a pretty brave thing to do. And now more than ever, it's time to dial up that emotional intelligence, and in particular to develop a great awareness of ourselves and to demonstrate that empathy to others. And another thing that I often draw back to myself and say to people, there's no magic wand in life. You know, we can't just wave that wand and magically transform into the person we want to be with all the barriers and challenges removed. But the one thing I know for sure is it takes constant work. So you may have used the tool before, the CIA tool, which is control, influence, and accept. So what can you directly control in a situation or within yourself? Where is it within your gift to take control and make a difference or find a solution? And if you can't control the situation, then what can you influence? Or who can you influence with your thoughts or your questions or your curiosity? And sometimes what do we need to accept? Sometimes we can spend too much time trying to change the things that we can't control or influence. And if we accept some of the things that we can't control, in the words of that wonderful classic Disney movie, let it go. I'll spare you my singing voice today, but it is about letting go what you can't control and focusing on what you can. Simple but effective tool. And to be your best self individually or as a business, we sometimes need to seek insight from others. And back to COVID, in the early months when COVID hit, we truly didn't know what would happen as a company, and I didn't know what was going to happen, and we were all kind of struggling to make the right decisions. And so I did three things. I reached out to all my competitors to ask how they were doing. We started a series of conversations with sector leaders in higher education in the UK predominantly, because that's where most of our clients are, to hear what was happening in the front line. Because sitting behind this screen, it was difficult to know what that was. And then we conducted an evaluation of our company with our current clients, those who had hired us, those who hadn't hired us, and some of our peers in the field. And so what did I learn from each of the above? Although none of my competitors reached out to me, I was being true to my values and doing something that was greatly appreciated by them, and certainly by some of the smaller companies who were feeling similar to me at the time, but maybe didn't feel as brave at the time to step up and to reach out. I better understood the challenges that our clients were facing and what they were navigating on a daily, sometimes hourly basis. And we've now developed that into a series of Cairney conversations. And we've moved from reflecting on, you know, the front line of COVID to how people are progressing and what they're doing going forward. And we were told that we were a critical friend by our clients and that we should have more confidence to be bolder and to stand up and showcase who we are. So we did. And so as we move forward into this new year with so much uncertainty and unknown challenges ahead, I thought I would share my 3 R's with you as a bit of a tool for your toolbox going forward. The first R is review. Take time and look back and review where you've come from in your journey. We don't often stop in a busy day to look at what we've achieved and what lessons we've learned, what mistakes you don't want to make again, what lessons have you perhaps not learned from and why, what is it that you're perhaps continuing to do that still isn't working. I often hear from people I coach, well, that's the way I am. I can't change. It's just my DNA. Is that true? I don't think it wholly is. I think at the core, we have our values that drive us and the decisions that we make, but I think we can change how we act or react. The second R is reflect. Dial up your self-awareness, as this is where you'll find the key to the next right step for you. Sit in that discomfort a bit longer, as this is where you'll find the honest answers that maybe have been staring you in the face and you only need to share with yourself. If you can't be honest with yourself, then it's even more difficult to be so with others. And the final R is recharge. Take what you know from the past, what you've reflected on about how you've reacted to things, and dance a bit more in the moment to bring back that clarity of thought to the forefront. And dancing in the moment is about becoming more curious, asking more questions. You're the only one capable of finding the right answers for you, and you have the resources within to make that change and to make that difference. So I encourage you to stay in that space a bit longer, stay with the discomfort, ask more questions, and always believe that the impossible is possible. You just haven't found the right answer for you yet. I've had the privilege of knowing some phenomenal women and men in my life, and have been influenced by so many of the strong women who've shaped me. I've had a strong foundation from my grandmother to my mother and to those I've worked with, and they've all made a difference in my life. And I'll finish with just a final quote from the fabulous Maya Angelou, who said, "I've learned that making a living is not the same thing as making a life. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. If you're always trying to be normal, you will never know how amazing you can be." So stay curious, and in Nancy's words, illuminate your world. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. That was super terrific, super terrific. And I think one key phrase is the courage to be vulnerable. And I think as women, we never want to step out until everything is perfect. We never want to ask a question until we're sure it's the right question. And really what this series is all about is just go for it. You know, you've got lots of unique ability, so step it up. And as our famous lady, Nellie McClung, never retreat, never apologize, never, what's the other one?
Never explain, get the job done, and let them howl.
Okay, so there you go. Let her rip. Okay, that was super terrific. And thank you again. So wonderful. Now, you were the UK Businesswoman of the Year, were you not?
Scottish Businesswoman of the Year.
Scottish Businesswoman. It's funny, we wouldn't have known that from your accent.
I said to Nancy beforehand, I was practicing rounding my vowels.
So great. Okay, so Crystal, maybe we have some questions. Maybe we can bring back Lisa and see if we've got some questions for these ladies.
I'm just looking through the message. I didn't see any questions pop into the messages, but if anybody has a question and they want to pop on camera now, welcome you to do that. Or pop it into the chat here. Just some great thank you messages that are in the chat. Very inspiring, great messages from each of you. Thank you, Karen. This is a powerful message given an important time. Here's a question. How are you both reaching out to young women early in their careers? I'll start with you, Lisa.
Well, I have one advantage, which is that I currently have a young woman earlier in her career. And so I have the opportunity, which is my daughter, who's been out of university for 2.5 years. And so I have this whole plethora of people from the various schools that she's attended that I am mentoring right now. In addition, one of the things that I've been doing is very systematically reaching out to communities that are more diverse than the one I am from. That might be color or economics, and providing mentorship opportunities, job placement opportunities for people within those communities, and working with leaders in those communities to put me in contact with kids that I can be helpful to.
And
Perfect.
Crystal, similar to Lisa, there's been young women who've come into our company for short periods of time as they're coming out of university, not figuring out what their career path is. we knew they were not going to be with us for long, but they have worked very hard, and the team has mentored them, not just me. So I think it's about opening the doors and providing those opportunities and accessing networks where you can give that to younger women. So I think we could do more of that, certainly in our sector as well.
Crystal, Olivia's question is absolutely the essence of this whole series.
I agree. It's the next question I have. So both of you, do you have any tips about maintaining a positive mindset even when you're completely knackered? I love that word, knackered. Lisa, let's start with you.
Well, one thing that I've done, and I've done it my entire life, is if I've had a really bad day, I try to do one nice thing for somebody before I go to sleep. And social media actually makes that a little bit easier. It might be that I write a letter of recommendation for someone and send it off to, a university or a job. It might be that I see a job and send that to someone that I know is looking. Or it may be literally just going on LinkedIn and finding a few posts from different women that I know and doing something that's encouraging, helps extend their post. But for me, being able to do an offset, which is I had something bad happen, and so I actively go and just find something positive that I can do to make myself focus on what's important.
And I think as women, we tend to be hard on ourselves as well. And so one of the things I encourage others, it was two things. At the beginning of the day, something you call a PET scan, which is evaluate your physical, emotional, and thinking self. Because it's back to that self-awareness. If we come into the day knowing if we're knackered, that we couldn't take on another thing, that if someone asks us another question, then we can tend to navigate our day in a particular way because we're aware of how we're feeling. And then the other thing I would just add is, in every day, there's always one thing we could say that we did, and we did it well, and remind yourself of what that is.
Excellent. Really, really good.
Perfect. What would you tell your 20-year-old self now if you could?
Oh my goodness.
All right, Karen. What would you say to 20-year-old Karen?
Oh, that's such a good one. There's so many different answers to that. I know it's probably a cliche, but honestly, don't sweat the small stuff, because there's just a lot of big stuff out there. And I think if I could give myself one piece of advice, it would be to listen to others and take their guidance. Would be another thing that I would tell myself, and don't sweat the small stuff.
Those are very wise words, Karen, and I 100% agree. I think for myself, the other is don't let the bullies define the narrative of who you are. And that's something, to be honest with you, that I've had to remind myself even as recently as about 5 years ago. So it's really a hard thing. I think that is one of the toughest things. If you have a boss that's mean, if you have peers that are perhaps doing a little backstabbing or set you up to fail, don't let those bullies define who you are. Focus on the positives, use facts and data to help yourself identify an answer to a problem, but just stay on a high note.
Perfect. I have a very important next question. It's a follow-up to Olivia's question. What advice would you give us on how to recharge? So a lot of women are experiencing overload, running a business, leading a team, caring for dependents, kids, elderly parents, so many responsibilities. So how do you recharge and take care of yourself with that?
Do you want me to jump in? I'm happy to jump in first. I think everyone recharges in different ways. And as an executive coach, I also have a coach. And often I've asked her that question about myself. I just don't have enough time in the day. I'm running a business. My mother's elderly. There's so many things going on. And what I've been able to distill is what's important to me. So I actually get up 15 minutes earlier than everyone else in the house in the morning so that I can have my coffee in peace and quiet with no noise. So sometimes the recharge doesn't have to be a day off. It can actually be as short as a 15 or 20 minutes. It's for you. Then I make sure that I build self-care in now where I possibly can. For everyone, it's different. But when we do our diary each week or each month, make sure that you're building in, like diarize that time and you'll actually do it.
Absolutely. It's funny because I also am one of those people that'll get up earlier than everybody else. And I find I can think more clearly. My writing's better. Maybe I get that blog out, something that re-energizes me and puts me, it's really taking control of your own life. And one of the things I talk to people about, even with mentoring, is that when you step forward to help another person, that gives you control. You have control of your life then. But sometimes I know all the people that we help in our lives, it can make it very difficult. And so, as Karen said, scheduling that time to exercise, whether you're a swimmer, you're a biker, whatever it is that you do, you've got to set aside that time and give yourself permission to step away. And you need to step away.
Yes,
Crystal-
absolutely. And
Crystal, I'll add very, very briefly to that. I think, again, post-COVID, it was so tragic in so many places that when we're overwhelmed with so many challenges, always just, go down to the common denominator of being thankful that you're alive, because life is so precious and it's so fast and so fleeting that you just take a breath and say, you know what, I'm alive. And a lot of other people didn't make it. And so then prioritize all those challenges and all those things that you're overwhelmed with and say, okay, I think I can handle this. And I agree. Up first thing in the morning is the key to success.
well, that's funny. I'm a night owl, so I get my downtime at night when everybody goes to bed, and then it's my time. So it can work both ways. Great. I think that's it for the questions, and we do have a few things just to wrap up this series. Anybody else have any final words? Karen, Nancy, Lisa?
I'm just loving all the comments that are coming in as well. And I see someone's put up that apparently I'm very good to go to dinner with. So it must be someone who knows me well. It made me think about surround yourself by good people.
And I would just say, take credit for the good things that you do. Sometimes we are so hard on ourselves. And the reality is we even should take credit when we manage to stay alive, right? Like there's those times in business and you go, thank God we didn't die today. But you know what? You did a lot in order to get through the end of the day. So start taking a little bit of credit for what you accomplish and recognizing and acknowledging that for you to have accomplished that was not an easy task.
Yeah.
No. Excellent. Well, I will just say thank you so much, Lisa and Karen. You ladies are absolutely delightful and huge role models with excellent advice that we can all learn from. And I'm delighted that you'll come back again that first Monday in February, because Lisa will have been to Davos, so we'll hear about her experiences there. Karen may not yet be in South Africa, but we'll hear some of her philanthropic stories, because I think they're really, really interesting as role models, again, for us all. Crystal will tell us about what's happening next month or next Monday, but again, equally inspiring, and the two guest speakers will be exceptional, as were these two. So Crystal, over to you.
100%. Thank you so much, Karen and Lisa, for your words of wisdom today. Very timely, and what a powerful way to start off 2023. So next week, part 2 of our series is Bold and Brilliant Communication. We're going to have the fabulous Frances Wright from the Famous 5 Foundation and Sherry Graydon from Informed Opinions. So there to share about communications and the key for success for that, to create positive impact for daring women leaders. Really excited. So I'm going to pop the link into the chat. It is another... try that again. It is another free series for you to join us. You will get this the invitation as well as the recording to this event in your email box, if not today, first thing in the morning. Please share with others this recording and or the invitation for next week. The more the merrier. We love to have so many of you on. Last but not least, I'm going to pop up a quick survey as soon as you exit. It's going to just ask you some simple questions. We'd love your feedback. Feedback is important for us as we prepare our 2023 year for you. And that is it for me. Nancy, anything for you?
No, well done, Crystal. We've finished with time left over. I mean, what a bonus.
Right.
But again, thank you to Lisa and Karen. Thank you, Paul, for your sponsorship. And of course, thank you, Crystal, for all the terrific work that you do. So thank you, everybody, for being our guests, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.